Intelligence is not academic achievement. It is not titles, status, or the ability to control everything perfectly. Intelligence, according to Jung, is an inward journey. It is the process of peeling away the masks society has imposed on you to return to the authentic self within. It does not come from always being right, but from having the courage to face your mistakes, your fears, and the shadow you often avoid. And to do this, you cannot merely follow external formulas. You must listen to the voice within, recognize the psychological patterns that have governed you for too long, and learn to transcend them. In this journey, I will share with you 9 key principles, not only to help you become a wiser woman, but also to guide you step by step toward individuation. Understanding yourself, accepting yourself, and living as a whole being. And perhaps, you may not like everything I reveal, but if you are brave enough to keep reading, I promise you one thing. You will not be the same woman after completing these 9 principles. Are you ready? Principle 1. Awakening the shadow. If your mind is a stage and you are the lead actress, the shadow is another character standing in the wings. It has no lines, yet it silently rewrites the script at the last moment. You step out, smile, behave properly, but your hands tremble. Your heart races when someone praises another. You feel anger at being overlooked, and you don't understand why. The shadow is not a demon, not something evil. It is the part excluded from your starring role. Everything that doesn't fit the image of the good woman you were taught to be, praised for being, you hide backstage. The shadow is the part you dare not bring into the light, yet it exists, and sometimes it takes over the performance. The shadow doesn't arrive like a storm. It's so subtle you might think you're just overreacting. But in truth, it's the echo of the parts you've cast aside. Jung called this the mechanism of psychological projection, where you attribute to others the parts of yourself you refuse to face. The shadow is the ancient language of the soul. It doesn't speak in words, but in memories, emotions, and dreams. When you dream of being chased, when you feel fear without reason, when you act in ways you don't recognize yourself, that's the shadow whispering something you've ignored for too long. A wise woman doesn't deny her shadow, she befriends it. She doesn't flee from jealousy, weakness, or anger. She faces them like an explorer shining a flashlight into a dark cave. She understands that the shadow is not an enemy, but a message from the depths of the unconscious. A hidden treasure if you're brave enough to dig deep. Awakening the shadow is the first and most challenging step in the journey of individuation. Jung called it a sacred journey. You must let go of the illusions of, I'm good, I'm always fine, to be reborn as a more honest, whole self. Why is confronting the shadow so crucial? Because if you don't understand what's within you, it will control you. A woman who deludes herself into believing, I'm fine, I'm generous, I'm never jealous, is the most vulnerable to being manipulated by the very part she denies. When you refuse to acknowledge an emotion, it seeps into your behavior. When you don't name your wounds, they speak for you through defensiveness, avoidance, or veiled aggression. The shadow is not something you can heal and discard. It is a part of you, like night is part of a day. A wise woman learns to live with her shadow, not fight it. She learns to listen to her dreams, keep an inner journal, trace her emotions, and notice her body's reactions, as if decoding an ancient language. The more she understands her shadow, the more power she holds over herself. The shadow is also the source of the most potent creative energy. The greatest artists, revolutionaries, and powerful souls have all walked through their shadows. There is no depth if you only live on the surface. There is no true light if you've never stood in the dark. A wise woman doesn't chase artificial light. She delves into the shadow to find the true light, the light that shines from within her. Awakening the shadow is not a training program. It's a silent agreement with yourself. From now on, I will not turn away from the parts I don't want to see. From now on, I will view the shadow not as an enemy, but as a signal, a radar. An internal warning system sends me the pieces I need to collect to become myself. Principle 2. Trust your intuition. But not everything from the shadow is a threat. Some whispers come from a deeper, quieter, and strangely more mysterious place. If the shadow is the hidden face of the soul, intuition is the formless voice of your true self, the whole and transcendent part that Carl Jung saw as the center of the entire individuation journey. Intuition doesn't shout. It doesn't explain. It doesn't offer evidence. It appears like a gentle touch, as if someone softly pulls you out of the crowd, turning your head in a completely different direction you can't explain but feel is right. You might call it a hunch. But for Jung, intuition is an independent psychological function, equal to thinking, feeling, and sensation. The problem is, in the modern world, we've starved our intuition for too long. A wise woman doesn't just analyze and respond logically. She also listens to unarticulated signals, the subtle vibrations in her mind, the cues that defy logic, yet are strangely accurate. Jung described intuition as perception via the unconscious, the ability to sense what's coming before it takes shape, like a bird sensing rain from hundreds of miles away before the storm arrives. Have you ever entered a room and instantly felt a chill, despite everything seeming normal? Met someone and knew within seconds that something was off? Prepared to make a decision, with every reason to act, but something deep inside held you back? That's not instinct. That's intuition, your inner warning system, directly connected to the unconscious, bypassing both will and conscious thought. Carl Jung once said, "Intuition does not denote something contrary to reason, but something outside of the province of reason." Intuition is the rough blueprint the self sends you, before the world assembles it into reality. However, not every inner voice is intuition. Intuition never shouts, panics, or urges. If you hear a voice that's frantic, tense, or fearful, it might be your ego, fear disguised as a feeling. Intuition is different. It arrives like pale gray light, breaking through fog, unpressured, unhurried, but weighty. A wise woman learns to distinguish between the voice of intuition and the echo of fear, and she chooses what to heed. Intuition is not a mystical sixth sense. It's the result of a mind connected deeply enough, clearly enough, quietly enough to the unconscious to receive its signals. To trust your intuition, you must slow down, learn to observe your inner life as a universe with its order. You must let go of the obsession with being certain or being right to make space for what's not yet clear to take form. The wiser a woman becomes, the less she rushes to decide. She lets intuition speak first, then uses reason to verify, not the other way around. Jung called this the balance between the inner and outer worlds, between logic and depth, where intuition acts as the mediator between consciousness and the unconscious. And most wonderfully, intuition doesn't just steer you away from danger, it guides you toward the most beautiful things. True love, the right path, the perfect moment. It's like background music, not loud, but it changes how you experience the entire film. Trusting intuition is learning to live with a perception finer than words. Not everyone hears intuition's call, but every woman possesses it. It's part of your spiritual inheritance, a red thread connecting you to something greater than yourself. And if you learn to listen, it will lead you further than any pre-drawn map. So, what about you? If you've ever known something before logic could speak, share that moment, and let's unfold the map of collective intuition together. Principle 3. Cultivate emotional intelligence. If intuition is the breeze blowing from the unseen, emotions are the first waves touching the shore of your mind. And like all waves, they can be soothing or sweep you away if you don't know where to stand. Intuition whispers, but emotions roar. They don't wait for you to be ready. Emotions are the rawest material of your mental life. They arrive before thoughts, command your behavior, and if left unconscious, they'll steer your entire life along a path you'd never consciously choose. That's why a wise woman doesn't control her emotions. She observes them like a meteorologist, tracking a low-pressure system. No judgment, no suppression, but never mistaking a stormy sky for the true sky. Jung once said, "Emotion is the chief source of becoming conscious." Emotions aren't the problem, they're the doorway. But the condition is that you must step through with awareness, not be swallowed by them. A woman untrained in emotional intelligence is like someone standing in the sea, overwhelmed by waves, mistaking herself for the water. A wise woman knows she has emotions, but she is not her emotions. Few of us were taught to sit with our sadness without wanting to escape it immediately. When anger comes, it pulls you along. Your voice changes, your heart pounds, your actions slip beyond control. But the truth is, you are not that angry. You're only identifying with it, like an actor so immersed in a role that she forgets she's just playing a scene. Emotions aren't your portrait. They're letters sent from the unconscious, meant to be read, not torn up or labeled weak. Jung warned, "What you resist persists." Emotional intelligence isn't about staying calm at all times. It's knowing when emotions take over and when you're responding consciously. The more mature a woman becomes, the more she realizes. Anger doesn't arise on its own. It's the outer garment of a deeper wound. Feeling offended often stems from an unmet need for recognition. Through this inner tracing, you cease to be a puppet of your emotions and become their decoder, unraveling a neural code that demands understanding. Emotional intelligence is also the ability to sense others' emotions without merging into them. A woman with weak inner boundaries will feel for others, hurting for them, carrying their emotional weight as if it were her own. A wise woman is different. She sets soft boundaries between empathy and absorption. She listens not to save, but to understand. She lets others take responsibility for their emotions because she knows it's essential to their growth. For Jung, psychological maturity cannot occur without the ability to observe yourself while reacting. You can love, rage, or hurt, but you don't let those emotions pull you away from yourself. Jung saw this as the first step in individuation, separating yourself from your emotions to see yourself more clearly in their reflective mirror. Each emotion is a mirror. A wise woman doesn't shatter it. She studies it to discern what stirs within her mind. And most importantly, emotional intelligence is a skill, not an innate trait. It's forged each time you pause amid an impulse. Each time you choose to exhale instead of retort. Every such moment proves to yourself that you're awake enough not to be ruled by the storm within. Principle 4. Establishing boundaries. Emotions are the inner stream of water, but to keep that stream pure, you need embankments. Without boundaries, everything spills over, drowning you and turning empathy into exhaustion, connection into dissolution. So, after learning to observe your emotions, a wise woman takes another step, drawing the line between herself and the world, not to isolate, but to preserve. Carl Jung didn't directly define boundaries, but his entire concept of individuation, the journey to become your true self, implies a prerequisite. You must know where you end and where others begin. To know this, you need boundaries, like the skin encasing a body, or the shell protecting a sprouting seed. Without boundaries, your essence is invaded, and you remain a reaction to others rather than yourself. You don't need to build walls to be safe, but you must recognize your territory and where others encroach, whether through actions cloaked in love, expectations, or good intentions. Someone who loves you can still suffocate you. Someone close can still manipulate you if you don't know how to stand on your ground. Jung believed we're all swept into collective roles: the good daughter, the dutiful wife, the reasonable woman. The longer you play these roles, the further you drift from yourself. Boundaries are the pause, the moment you pull your energy back from the role and ask, what do I truly want? Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's a sacred ritual to affirm your existence, separate from others' expectations. Many live in a state of chronic exhaustion without knowing why. They work hard, act kindly, are always there for others, yet their bodies tire, their minds burn out, and their spirits feel empty. This isn't just work pressure, it's burnout, caused by giving too much without an inner fence to protect yourself. Failing to say no, failing to set limits, is the shortest path to depletion. If you feel exhausted without understanding why, take a quiet moment. Breathe slowly. Pause for 3 minutes and ask yourself, am I living for what I believe in today, or for what others need? A wise woman doesn't feel guilty for setting boundaries. She knows, where there are no boundaries, there is no respect. And the first respect is for herself. When she needs to say no, she does so with groundedness, not tension. When she needs to limit a relationship, she does so not out of hatred, but out of enough self-love to not stay where she shrinks day by day. Boundaries don't kill connection. They make relationships more mature, because when you stand clearly on your ground, others must approach you with respect rather than habitual encroachment. And you too, when you understand boundaries, stop blaming, stop demanding others save you, stop over-sacrificing, then resenting. You become emotionally mature, standing beside others, not dissolving into them. And ultimately, when you know where you end, when you dare to protect what's sacred within you with a firm no, you don't just become stronger, you become clear. In a world blurred by expectations and roles, a clear woman makes the world pause to listen. At this point, we've reached the halfway mark of today's lessons. Your presence is a great encouragement for us in our journey to bring the authentic values of Jung's philosophy to more people. So please like and share this video to spread these lessons to your loved ones and friends. Or leave a comment saying, I cherish my life, if you're ready for the journey with the next 5 lessons. Principle 5. Financial independence. Once you've built your mental boundaries, the next thing to protect is your ability to choose. And at this point, nothing is more practical or more sensitive than money. In its material form, money is a tool for exchange, survival, and livelihood. But in the depths of psychology, money is a symbol of personal power, the energy you use to exist in the real world while staying true to your inner world. From a young age, most women aren't taught how to handle money. They're taught it's men's business. You weren't taught to invest, negotiate, or control your cash flow. You were praised for saving, for living simply, but rarely was money framed as a form of freedom you could learn and master. The collective unconscious has planted a subtle belief in women. Security comes from gentle dependence. But Jung would reject this. He believed true freedom comes only when you break free from outdated archetypes like the good girl, the sacrificial wife, or the woman who relies on a husband to survive. A wise woman doesn't see financial independence as rebellion. She sees it as a form of psychological maturity. She understands that if she doesn't control her money, she'll eventually trade parts of herself for a sense of security from someone else. And she refuses that price out of self-respect. Money doesn't just buy clothes, food, or comforts. More importantly, it buys you the right to choose what aligns with you, to leave a toxic relationship without fear of how you'll survive, to quit job when its values no longer match yours, to say no to a great opportunity when it contradicts your beliefs. At its deepest, money is an invisible wall protecting your essence from being wounded by circumstance. Jung didn't discuss finance in economic terms, but he emphasized inner wholeness, possible only when the ego is strong enough not to be manipulated by survival fears. In the real world, those fears take concrete forms. What if I lose my job? What if no one takes care of me? What if I have no one to rely on? These questions aren't wrong, but a wise woman doesn't let them become reasons to trade her freedom. Financial independence doesn't mean you must become a millionaire. It means knowing where your money goes, understanding how to spend, save, and most importantly, how to keep money from controlling your emotions or defining who you are. Money doesn't have to be a burden. It can be an ally if you learn to see it as part of your psychological system, not something out of reach. If this message resonates with something inside you, please hit like to fuel more of this meaningful content, and subscribe to not miss any part of this journey toward your true self. There's a subtle truth few mention. Many women fear having money because they fear losing their reason to be loved. Traditional society programs the idea that a fragile woman inspires men to protect. But a wise woman knows love shouldn't be built on lack. She wants love for companionship and sharing, not for survival. And that's only possible when she can stand on her own, emotionally and financially. Picture financial independence as an invisible atmosphere around your planet. Without it, you can't breathe to your rhythm. You'd live in fear of losing support, status, or a backer, and you'd no longer be the center of your own life. A wise woman doesn't wait for luck to find her. She learns about money like she learns about herself. Every dollar, every choice, every priority reflects her inner values. She doesn't spend to prove anything to the world. And she invests, not just for the future, but for present freedom. The freedom to act, to leave, to choose again if needed. Money doesn't make you stronger, but if you understand how to use it as a tool for autonomy, you'll never again live in fear of being conditioned. Principle 6. Learning to fail. Financial freedom grants you the power to choose, but no matter how well you prepare, life will sometimes unfold differently than planned. A contract may collapse at the last moment. An investment may turn into a loss. A love that seemed certain may dissolve into thin air. There will be times when you do everything right, yet the outcome is wrong. And that's when you face something no one wants to touch. Failure. A wise woman isn't someone who has never failed, but someone who doesn't let failure become her identity. Carl Jung called this the death of the ego, when the self that thought it knew everything must crumble to open the door for a deeper essence to emerge. In depth psychology, failure isn't merely loss, it's a cleansing ritual for the ego, a moment when the universe strips away layers no longer fitting, allowing you to become something truer. Failure has a distinct sound. It's quiet, heavy, like a door closing within your mind. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. True growth always involves a fall. No one steps into their depth without a collapse. The old ego must shatter, illusions of omnipotence must dissolve, and if you dare to linger in the rubble just a little longer, you'll see, beneath the gray dust, a new self is slowly taking shape, gradual, painful, but real. Failure doesn't make you worthless. It only kills the version of yourself you thought was singular, like a snake shedding its skin, like a seed rotting before it sprouts. But the problem is, in this society, we're programmed to tie our worth to achievements, so each failure feels not just like losing an opportunity, but losing our identity. A wise woman learns to separate the two. She falls, but she doesn't define herself by the fall. Failure is a form of living shadow, as Jung might describe it. It's not just a mistake. It's a moment when the shadow rises to the surface, forcing you to confront your limits. You'll see yourself angry, envious, broken, wanting to give up. But this is the golden opportunity to make the darkness conscious, as Jung said. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. One of the most dangerous illusions is believing that success proves your worth. Number. Success only proves you are aligned with circumstances. Failure is where you see who you truly are when no one applauds. It's where character is tested, where beliefs are dissected, where the self is reborn. If you resist failure, deny it, or flee from it. You'll only learn bitterness. But if you sit with it, breathe through it, write about it, reflect on it like a rough mirror, you'll emerge with a different gaze. The gaze of someone who has died once and chosen to live again, more authentically. Failure isn't just a test for you. It's a silent test for those around you when your spotlight fades. Who stays when you're no longer winning? Who quietly lifts you without needing you to prove anything? And who leaves when you're no longer their source of value? And you, after all, are you clinging to an old belief that no longer fits your new journey? Write it down as a conscious closing ritual. Write down an old belief you're ready to release. A wise woman doesn't hold on to those who leave when she falls. She understands that those who come only when she shines don't belong to her when she's reborn. She doesn't resent. She remembers. Like a quiet lesson, like a natural filter failure provides to keep only the relationships deep enough, real enough, human enough. Failure isn't the end. It's an ellipsis, inviting you to rewrite yourself in a different voice. Deeper, quieter, and so authentic it needs no embellishment. Principle 7. Never stop learning. Failure may be a fall, but if you dare to look up, it's also a gateway. And when you step through that gate, what you need isn't someone to pull you forward, it's you. A version of you that learns, transforms, and evolves continuously. In that moment, you realize, learning is no longer an activity. It's a survival instinct. Carl Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. But to accept anything, pain, mistakes, failure, or even yourself, you must learn. Not to rationalize, but to see differently, feel differently, understand differently." For a wise woman, never stopping learning isn't about accumulating knowledge. It's a quiet ritual to keep herself from freezing into an outdated version of herself. A woman who stops learning will soon be trapped in her obsolete operating system. She'll react the same way, love the same way, and wonder why everything repeats. A woman who never stops learning is different. She isn't afraid to be wrong, because she knows every mistake is data, a signpost for what needs updating within her. True learning doesn't happen in classrooms or neatly stacked books. It happens in every moment. When you choose silence to hear something you once resisted. When you reread yourself with a new, unguarded gaze. Learning is dismantling an old belief without needing anyone to prove it wrong. Jung called this the process of assimilating and integrating new experiences into a deeper self. The wiser a woman becomes, the less she thinks she knows enough. She knows the self is always shifting, and the only thing keeping her from falling behind is a state of constant learning, not from external knowledge, but from her own inner life. True learning doesn't make you better. It makes you less harsh, less certain, less quick to label everything. It pulls you out of the subtle complacency of "I already know" and places you in the sacred territory of questions, where every unknown becomes a chance to expand your inner world. A wise woman doesn't learn to outshine others. She learns to master herself. She learns to update her boundaries, refresh her way of loving, adjust her reactions, and discern what's false and what's true. Most importantly, she learns to avoid being conditioned by her outdated self. The more mature a woman becomes, the less ambitiously she learns. She learns like someone listening for signals, from a casual conversation, a dream, a recent anger, a quiet moment after loss. She learns like a woodcarver, each stroke drawn from the living material of herself. Has something recently made you relearn yourself? A moment, something that forced you to pause and ask, "Am I living as an outdated version of myself?" If so, share a few lines, not just for yourself, but for others quietly seeking answers in their journeys. As Jung said, enlightenment comes not from what you know, but from the courage to stand before what you don't understand and enter it unguarded. A woman who never stops learning remains pliable, adaptable, bendable, but not breakable, because she knows, if she doesn't learn, she'll repeat. But when she learns, every wound can become a window. Each time you learn something new, whether knowledge, a new perspective, or a hard-to-swallow truth, you open another room in the house of yourself. And over time, that house doesn't need to be grand. It just needs to be bright and real enough for you to dwell in it wholly. Principle 8. Stop seeking approval. Continuous learning shifts how you see. But to truly live by what you've understood, you need a bolder step. Stop living for others' eyes. That's when you cease seeking approval. Carl Jung called the mask we wear in society the persona, a constructed self designed to adapt, to be accepted, to avoid exclusion. The problem is, if you live too long in the persona, you start believing it's your true self. You bend to fit others' expectations until you no longer recognize your true voice. Imagine a woman in a meeting. Her idea could open a new path for the project. She knows it. But when the team leader's eyes turn to her, the first thing that surfaces isn't her idea, but a subtle wave in her mind. What if they think I'm too ambitious? What if they judge me? So she stays silent. She nods with the majority. She smiles, though a storm rages inside. Approval, if you're not mindful, becomes a spiritual narcotic. At first, you need a compliment. Then you do more to earn a nod. Gradually, you're addicted to the feeling of being recognized, as if it's oxygen, and you lose the ability to value yourself without external validation. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you cannot become yourself if you're still running on the operating system of how to be loved. To return to your true self, you must dare to risk not being loved, not being understood, even being misjudged, yet not losing yourself. A woman who stops seeking approval doesn't become cold. On the contrary, she becomes warmly authentic. When she no longer needs to perform, her actions come from true intent, not a desire to score points. She stops saying what should be said, laughing on cue, or nodding to avoid awkwardness. She pauses mid-conversation if she feels herself slipping into performance mode. Most importantly, she knows that only when she allows herself to be herself does true respect begin to form. When you live too long in the persona without connecting to your true self, you fall into what Jung called ego disorientation. You no longer know what you truly want, like, or believe. You only know what will please others. A wise woman sees this danger. She knows nothing makes you lose yourself faster than always trying to please others. Letting go of the need for approval is a return to your inner moral center. Instead of asking, "What will others think?" you start asking, "Will I still respect myself if I do this?" That's when your inner power begins to take shape. True approval, when you stop seeking it, often comes quietly and more profoundly. Others sense you don't need validation, and that makes you more trustworthy than ever. You don't need to prove. You don't need to seem. And you certainly don't need to live in the invisible hunger of, "How do I get someone to say I'm good enough?" When you no longer need anyone to give you value, you begin to live like an unconfined stream, a pulse that doesn't need to sync with any other drum. You still listen, remain soft, but you don't trade your essence for others' comfort. Principle 9. Awakening the self. When you stop living for applause, stop confining yourself to the image others expect, a new space begins to open within you. A strange stillness. As if for the first time you hear your heartbeat without needing anyone to remind you it's still alive. That moment, Jung called it the awakening of the self. Unlike the ego, which seeks to control, compete, and come out on top, the self doesn't need to prove anything. It only asks you to turn inward, honestly. If the ego is the one holding the flashlight in the dark, the self is the flame within that light, smoldering, enduring, shining only when you're still enough not to extinguish it with fear or expectations. Carl Jung defined the self as the regulating center of the entire personality, both the whole and something transcending the ego. In other words, it's you, unconditioned, unshackled by others' definitions of who I should be. It's the whole self, full of contradictions yet unified, cracked yet radiant in its unique way. The self isn't a destination you reach and settle into forever. It's like an underground river flowing beneath your consciousness, always there, but only visible when you're brave enough to shed hardened layers of skin, decayed layers of ego, and heavy masks. Each time you pass through a shadow, each time you don't let anger speak for you, each time you stand in uncertainty without shrinking, you come a little closer to the self. You may not recognize that moment immediately. It's not like a ringing bell or a beam of light through your forehead. It comes in a distinct silence. One day, when you look in the mirror after a difficult decision, instead of doubt, you feel something settle in your eyes, a peace not from victory, but from inner honesty. That's when the self is looking back at you. In psychological terms, the self is the deepest operating system, where the personal and collective unconscious intersect, where all archetypes, the mother, the lover, the rebel, the sage, are consciously and selectively integrated. When the self awakens, you're no longer trapped in a single form of ego, but become fluid. When you need to be firm, you can be firm without hardening. When you need to be soft, you can be soft without breaking. And because the self is your whole essence, you begin to live to a different rhythm, not chasing success, but truth. Not living for more, but for deeper. You start speaking less, listening more carefully, choosing more deliberately, and most importantly, respecting yourself more. Not because you need to maintain an image, but because you truly understand who you are and what's no longer worth trading yourself for. Awakening the self doesn't make your life easier, but it makes it harder to control. You may be challenged, misunderstood, and rejected, but you won't be shaken from the inner axis you've firmly built. And that doesn't create a perfect woman. It creates a free woman. Carl Jung didn't teach you how to be accomplished or loved. He guided you back to a deeper self, the whole essence, where light and shadow are invited to sit together at the same table. And if there's anything worth pursuing for a lifetime, it's the truth of who you are. You don't need to understand everything today. Just hold on to a piece that makes you see yourself. Save this video if you want to return to it when you need more courage. You've made it this far, which means you're